And back at home. Welcome everybody to this afternoon's meeting of the Margam Joint Crematorium Committee. Before I start the meeting and go into the agenda, it would be remiss of me as chair, and I know that Councillor Sheila Penry was spoken about and received lavish tributes at full council. But it would be remiss of me not to mention Sheila at the beginning of this meeting. Sheila was a member of the Joint Committee from 2016 up to 2021. And in those 5 years that she was on or part of this Joint Committee, Sheila's contribution was first class. She contributed in every meeting. She brought a laugh to the table, and she was very, very well respected. A little, very, very little story that I will tell you. As chair of the Joint Crematorium Committee, I was lavished praise upon myself after 2016 because attendance at these meetings was 100%. It was 100% attendance from committee members, and it was 100% attendance from officers. And I always give myself a little pat on the back to say, well, I can't be doing a bad job because of the attendance figures we had. And then it was quietly pointed out to me that there was nothing at all to do with my my chairing of the meetings. It was all down to the fact that everybody turned up because of the goodies that Councillor Penry had baked for us the previous day, whether they be gatos, butterfly cakes, or homemade biscuits, Welsh cakes, the lot. It really, really was a treat, and I mean that. It was a treat to have the Margam Crematorium Committee meetings. It's probably on record that they didn't last very long because Clive would get the bone shiner out, and we just have tea and coffee and all these lovely goodies. But yeah, Sheila is fondly remembered by certainly by me and I'm sure by everybody else within council, and she will be sorely missed. Yeah, we recognise Sheila in the full council, but I think if you could just bear with me, and we hold a few moments silence in memory of our colleague, Councillor Sheila Penry. There we go. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Okay, I'll go on to the agenda, part one, item one, item one, any declarations of interest. If anybody has got any interest to declare. See any, thank you very much. Item two in part one is minutes of the previous meeting. They're on pages 3 to 4. I'll go through them for accuracy, and then if there's any matters arising, then we'll take them after. First page, we got declarations of interest, minutes of the previous meeting. Item 3, annual budget report 24-25. That goes over leaf to items 4 and 5. Are we happy there to record? Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Any matters arising out of those sets of minutes? No, I don't see any, so happy to accept those. Yep, thank you very much. Okay, moving on then. Agenda item 3, I'll hand over to Craig to take this one. It's the fees for Saturday services at Margam Crematorium. Craig?
Great, thank you very much, Chair. So members will recall at the last meeting, we set the budget for the 24-25 financial year, but one of the elements you've asked officers to go back and look at was the charge that we were actually introducing for a Saturday service at Margam Crematorium. So you'll be aware that previously the fee that we've added additional to the usual cremation fees was £356 for a Saturday booking because of the additional cost pressures ultimately that we were having at the crematorium in meeting Saturday services. So what we started to do by looking at this was do a little bit of a comparison with other authorities within the region and other crematoriums, both public and private, to just try and get an idea about whether they were adopting a similar approach as well. And you'll see then from your report that most crematoriums are offering a Saturday surcharge fee, which ranged within the region of £240 to £375. Originally, as I mentioned, it was there obviously just to recognise some of the additional pressures that could be there on the weekend. For example, additional payments that are made to staff due to it being weekend hours, utility rates, and all of those sort of different elements associated with it. What we thought would be helpful to do then is just give you a number of the number of funerals that obviously we have on Saturdays. So as you can see, a overall steady increase over the last couple of years. And from the latest figures of 23-24 April to December, you'll see there's been 23 Saturday services, and the corresponding income then ultimately that comes with it. So the question ultimately now before members is, do you wish to retain the Saturday surcharge at the current rate? Do you wish to remove it? Or ultimately, do you wish to change it? That could be increase or decrease. So there are several factors that we need to consider when we are trying to take our way through this. And I've tried to give a little bit of an overview there. So some of the gas usage figures that's there, additional cleaning cost, lighting, staff, organist fees, and some of the other elements that ultimately go with it. And we've tried to try and have a bit of a balance in this sense for it to try and find out what demand would be, what impact ultimately it could have on the crematorium. And it's clear that some of the advantages ultimately be here to members of the public. You would have a reduced fee for anyone who wishes to have Saturday services who would be unable to hold one during the week for whatever reason ultimately may be. And you'd also have a consistent fee service then going forward. Some of the concerns ultimately we did have is if we were to make some changes in that regard were, for example, additional cleaning costs that may be necessary, if there's any additional energy consumptions, if cremations were taking place. And obviously at the weekends in the crematorium, we operated a reduced staffing level compared to within the week with normally just 2 members of staff in place. The additional workload pressures that could come if we had an increased number of services then on a Saturday. So the proposal that we felt we could put before you as members today is that we do actually look at a reduction of the fee, and that fee then be reduced to £175 just to cover the additional costs that we've identified as part of this additional service. And that's been undertaken by our treasurer and our accountant, Karina, and myself to try and find a appropriate level we could go with. So that you will see now is significantly lower in the region from the figures that we had in the initial report. In order to address the capacity elements at the moment and some of the concerns we have, what we were just going to suggest is initially we limit the number of potential services that are taking place on a Saturday to 3, which we review in 6 months' time. It'll just give us an option to see then how the staff are coping with those additional elements, if we need to bring in additional staff numbers to be able to address this and to look at it then on a more longer term basis to ensure the resilience to meet that fee. The crematorium staff are obviously happy to support that as part of the process and the discussions that we've had with them, and we think ultimately that it could work for the service going forward with that ongoing review. So it is important to know, obviously, because from a financial perspective, the income that we will be generating from the Saturday services will be slightly reduced. However, we don't feel it would have any major impact in the sense of what we were looking at in the overall budget position of the crematorium. So the proposal, Chair, subject to members' endorsement and approval today, would be that we do now reduce the additional fee for Saturdays to £175, but we place a cap for 3 services at present, but a report to be brought back to you in 6 months' time, just highlighting the issues or any complications that may have arisen. And if we find that it has no major impact, we would look then potentially at either increasing the cap or removing it altogether.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Karina, I know you've done a bit of work, or a lot of work on this. Do you want to add anything to what Craig has said?
So we've looked at obviously the staffing costs, potentially the additional cleaning costs that would be incurred. We've agreed between us that we feel £175 is reasonable, that it won't put us in a detrimental position. So as long as members are happy, we are happy that £175 is a reduction that we can build into the budget.
Okay, thanks. When will this be implemented?
To be implemented, Chair, from the 1st of April.
Any members, any questions or queries or comments? No? Okay. So are we happy to accept the recommendation on page 9?
I move, Chair.
Okay, all happy with that then? Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There we are. That's approved then. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Trina. Okay, moving on. Agenda item 4. Is this titled wrongly? Over to Craig again.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just apologise in the first instance? I realised the title is wrong on this report. It's been taken from a previous version. The point ultimately, just to be aware, it relates to a report here that's been undertaken by the Federation of Burial and Cremation Authorities. So just so that's noted ultimately in the minutes. So this is a report that we received back at the end of last year. Margam Crematorium, as a member of the Federation of Burial and Cremation Authorities, has a 3-yearly inspection by that organisation, obviously to look to see are we in approval of the various different aspects and the systems that they have in place. So they scrutinise 6 separate key areas of service, looking at various different aspects across the board, from administration to grounds to customer availability, services in general across the board, and obviously then look at the legal compliance elements associated with it. So very positive. The report that ultimately came back, the crematorium inspector found an excellent level of service provision and did not feel it necessary to make any recommendations. Obviously, though, it's always good news when somebody can give some additional feedback as to different options that can be considered. And so they have given some matters that we may wish to consider ultimately going forward. And we've provided a breakdown in the report there. So just to give members a flavour of some of the things that they said, suggested the public having access to partial digital records to be able to find no resting places and limited details. At this stage of time, we still operate a manual system where members of the public obviously can contact us and we'll be able to explain the precise or general location as to where ashes ultimately have been interned. It is a little bit more complex ultimately to try and issue a system such as this, because we've also got some GDPR issues that are associated with it, the necessary consents you would have to get from individuals to be able to publish this information ultimately online. Given though that we are doing a lot of work at the moment in respect of our website and to try and modernise it and improve service access for individuals, it's something that we're going to take on board as to what potentially we could put on there without having any sort of major impact or significant workload as a result of trying to move with it. So that's positive in that regard. They mentioned about wheelchair use, but a wheelchair use can be accommodated within the chapel to take part in the event. One of the concerns was that the wheelchair could only sit at the side of the pew without actually being an integral part. Sadly, that is the position, and we can't really change the seating arrangements in place, obviously because of the listed element that the building obviously has then as well. So whilst we acknowledge the point that's been there, we will look to see about different ways ultimately we can try and incorporate it so nobody's at a disadvantage in any way, but it may be difficult to accommodate the proposal which the FBCA will ultimately suggest then. There's been a suggestion in place about a contingency plan being in place for cremator breakdowns. They said no contingency plan exists. Well, there is a contingency plan, and it's been sort of informal discussion ultimately with other crematoriums within the area, and it's something that all crematoriums have been considering going forward. So those discussions are going to be ongoing now with our neighbouring crematoriums to see if we can document some form of arrangement so we have a more formal process in place. Fortunately, we've been in a very good position. It's never had to be relied on in recent years. However, we'll document something to make sure that there is a consistency, and no doubt we'll be in a position, whoever we are seeking support from, so whether that be our immediate neighbours, we'll be able to offer similar levels of assurances ultimately to them at the same time. Baby changing facilities was mentioned. That is something that is noted, and we will be certainly looking to accommodate those now in the Talbot block refurbishment that we will be embarking on in future times. Grounds of memorialisation, if I can say that word. Applications for cremation are provided with information on a range of memorials. We are looking to enhance that a little bit further. Obviously, if information is available on request, we'll be looking at trying to make sure that members of the public who utilise the services of Margam Crematorium can be aware of the range of options that could potentially be open to them as well. Refreshment facilities available for business was one of the matters that was ultimately put forward. We've never had a determination before about refreshment facilities ultimately being provided. Obviously, if this is something that the Joint Committee would wish to explore in due course, we're more than happy to do some investigations as to what could be some avenues for consideration there. So a few areas there, obviously, for services to consider. What the FPCA now, though, have ultimately moved forward as well with are issues such as environmental awareness reports. And you'll be aware from the business plan for the crematorium that's been produced previously that it is something that's very much at the focus of Neath Talbot Council and the Joint Committee in that sense as well. So we've been looking at ways, obviously, as how we can environmentally improve the service offered then at Margam Crematorium. So you have heard previously that as part of the work that Neath Talbot Council is embarking on, the organisation Faithful and Gould have been asked to produce a roadmap to net zero for Margam Crematorium, and we'll be reporting this back to the committee in due course. I've heard that we are now in receipt of a draft report which has been fact-checked by officers, so hopefully within one of our next meetings we'll be able to present that back to you to give you a flavour of the types of issues we can be considering, and we can decide collectively then as a committee what we wish to prioritise and which we wish to move forward with. A couple of different matters were identified by the FBCA, and they picked up very basic matters such, for example, electric vehicle recharging points being provided. Does the facility harvest rainwater in sufficient quantities to use in our ground maintenance activities? So quite an interesting one there. We could look to see how we can implement that. They raised a question regarding Margam Crematorium having an environmental policy of its own. We haven't to date because we've always caught it under the Neath Talbot Council environment policy, but it's given us an area certainly for consideration, and as we move forward as part of the net zero element, we think it could be something beneficial to have a standalone document which highlights what we are doing as a joint committee and a crematorium to be able to move us into that net zero world. Energy performance certificate. The facility does not have a current certificate of exemption. We've investigated that. We don't actually feel we are obligated to have a certificate in this sense pursuant to the legislation. So it's a part that we have raised back now with the FBCA. And again, they've just picked up regarding switches to renewable energy supplies, which we'll be picking that up then as part of the Faithful and Gould work that's ongoing. So positive report I think we can take ultimately from the overarching assurances given. Always good to get a few recommendations for approval and things for us to consider as we set new business plans and new arrangements going forward. And we'll be due to have an inspection again in a further 3 years' time. It's hard to believe how fast the time goes since we're doing it, Chair. So happy to answer any questions, and of course Clive is here, who might be able to add any sort of individual aspects as he sort of led the inspection from the crematorium's perspective, but here today for noting.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Thanks very much. And endorse what you said about it being a very positive report. And again, not for the first time, congratulations to yourself and the staff down there, Clive. Any questions or comments on the report? Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I endorse the comments regarding the staff and in general the service that we provide, but I'm at a loss in some of these recommendations. One I think is very relevant in relation to the cremator breakdowns. You know, that's a business critical area, which I had to highlight in cabinet scrutiny this week. That needs to be addressed. So that is, in my mind, top of the list. But then others, such as no hot and cold drinks available. People not going there for refreshments. Likewise, I've never, in all the years I've gone there with a funeral, ever seen a baby there. Now, I'm not saying that facility is not required, but I find it strange with premises and facilities. That's the only thing that they've picked up on, or what appears to be picked up on. And the final point that I've marked here about energy usage, we've sourced renewable energy supplies. Well, it's a listed building. We can't go put in photovoltaic cells on the roof and we wouldn't be able to have enough roof space in order for it to generate renewable. Can anyone tell me, unless they've got a wind turbine or photovoltaic in their back garden, that their energy is completely renewable? So I think some of the aspirations are a little bit out of kilter with the premises itself, but totally take on board the content and the 94.7%. You know, it's a good report. So don't take anything away from what I'm saying, but I think some of them, you know, they need to join the real world.
Absolutely, Councillor Jones, and I think the key issue for us now is this faithful and good report will tell us, well, what is open to us in light of the constraints that we deal with in respect of the listed status, to make sure that nothing impinges on that element. So we look forward, I think, to receiving that report with interest to see what avenues are there for consideration.
Just one thing, please, Chair. The Chair and I attended a seminar in Westerly Crematorium entitled Crematoria and the Environment, with lots of recommendations as to which way we should go forward. One of the recommendations was that any tea making facilities are removed from the premises. And I took this up with the Secretary of the FPCA as to why we were marked down on it, and they were actually recommending that we don't have that facility. And it is something they are looking at, to have that item taken out of the inspection. Thank you, Chair.
I think that proves my point.
Interestingly, on that very point, that the seminar that Clive referred to was actually held in the crematoria, but it's a new build down in Bristol, and it is actually, for want of a better word, a function room, Clive, wasn't it? There was bar facilities.
That's correct.
What they do down there is offer the wake, and believe it, there's quite a few of these springing up all over the place, but in new builds. You'd be surprised the amount of on-site wakes that take place. Yeah.
And I think they've got a facility for either two or three rooms there, which, yeah. One other point as well is regarding the baby changing facilities. We did actually have that facility at the Crem prior to the redevelopment of the office block, and it was the facility was taken away at that time when they redesigned the toilets. It's something again we can look at, and have that facility placed back in the probably the disabled toilet.
Clive had grown up in nappies with it. Rob and then Paul.
Yeah, and coming back to the collection of water, they've obviously never been there down in the Crem when it's been raining. We don't need any further water on that ground in order for it to be sustainable throughout the summer, because it's absolutely sodden. So, again, it's the practicalities of knowing. It's all very well going from a checklist. Have they got it? No, mark them down. It's the knowing of the area. Just take them for a walk around the gardens next time, Clive.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apologies for being late. I couldn't get the link on my computer. Just for the record, Chair, in Bergen, they do have a drinks, cold water drinks machine there. Have we got one in Margam, have we? They definitely got one in Bergen. I was there the other day. So,
no, we haven't. It's something that's, to be honest, has never been requested. We've got tea and coffee facilities in the funeral director / officiant's waiting room, but not actually cold drinks. Not even the staff will go cold drinks.
Okay.
Subtle hint there, Mr. Phillips, but we'll don't it come in?
No, I think very valid points ultimately that are being made here. Obviously, the report that's before you today is in line with what the FPCA obviously are adopting for all crematoria ultimately throughout the country. There will always be elements which are more applicable to some organisations than others. I think the key element is just taking that they're happy, they're comfortable, we've had good service reviews, no major recommendations for any changes. All we've got to look at now is obviously enhancing service provision to give more benefits ultimately to the people of Neath, Talbot and Bergen who use the crematorium. So I think all in all a positive read, Chair.
Yeah, thank you for letting me come back, Chair. On a general note, when it talks about that, there was mention here about the refurbishment of the external toilets, and Richard's here today representing the technical officer. I was wondering whether Richard is in a position to give us an update in relation to the forward work programme and scheme of works that we are looking at, because we have had delays here and slipped timescales, and based then on this report, it's important for us to know where and how we are progressing on that. I don't know if that's a fair question based on this report.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. We have been progressing with numerous reports in the background. For instance, the air conditioning has now got listed building consent and the order's been issued for that. We're working on the plans for the external area around the waiting, the exit route, and the remembrance garden and a canopy out for the exit. The toilets are going to be looked at to get a contractor in probably from April onwards. It has been a delay due to the workload within the department, but that has been pressing. We have met Cadw there, and they've told us what we can and can't do without listed building consent. So we are progressing.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Don't take this personally. That doesn't hold me with a lot of confidence in relation going forward, because we've been working on plans and working on schemes and for a considerable period of time. I think we need to see these plans with timescales now manifest themselves into progress for implementation. So therefore, Chair, can I request that we have an updated report on the schemes of work that we have authorised and approved for the next meeting, so it gives the technical officers, Richard, who happens to be sitting in the hot seat and is smiling under duress, I'm sure, but the technical officer gives us an updated report, because, you know, how long is a piece of string here? And I'm afraid that we're not getting anything done.
Craig, do you want to come in? Or?
Absolutely fine, Chair. That's no problem at all. We'll note it as on the forward work programme for a report to come back to give an update on the proposals and different ways forward, then to try and progress at the same time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, you don't see any other indications. Recommendation is on page 15 that we note the outcome of the inspection by the Federation. We all happy to go along with that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Next item on the agenda then is agenda item 5 on pages 37 to 38. Commission figures for July to December 2023. Clive?
Thank you, Chair. Members will note that the figures shown are pretty much the same, except for one entry, July 2023, when we surpassed all entries for July since the Crem opened, with 157 cremations. Why? I have no idea at all. But generally, the report shows it's almost like for like most months for the 2 years. You will note that there is one entry. It's in October 23 with one body part. That is in the instance where body parts have been retained for further examination by the coroner, and once they have been those examinations have been completed, then those remains will also come to the Crem for cremation, and that is that's the first one in probably 20 years that we've had. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Clive. Any questions on that report or that particular point? Rob?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I was going to query that as a question. I've never seen that in the years that I've sat on the Crem committee of a body part. But there was a scandal, I think it was Alderhay Hospital in Liverpool, where the hospital had retained body parts and people didn't realise that they weren't part and parcel of the cremation. So obviously, are these sent direct from the coroner, and are the families aware of this, and are they handed back? You know, what's the process, in other words?
In that particular case, we had an approach from the funeral director, and we arranged for those for the body part to be delivered to the crem, and then we cremated accordingly. It is with the knowledge of the family, and in this particular instance, I know they were relieved at final closure.
Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was wondering, do the family pay twice then, or do they pay part price? For just one part, like?
In that particular instance, as what would happen, there was no charge.
Okay. Sorry, well.
Right. Okay. Okay, thanks, Clive. So the recommendation on page 38 is that we note, before I go that, I think it's, if you look at item 3 or paragraph 3 there about the webcasting, and I think the fact that we do now send services as far afield as Australia, New Zealand, etc., fully justifies and endorses the decision that we took to have this facility put down in Margam Crematorium. So yeah, recommendation there is that we note. Are we all okay? Okay, thank you very much. So we note that one. Last item on the agenda is urgent items. I haven't been informed of any, and we haven't got any. So can I thank you all for your attendance, both here in the chamber and at home. I wish I could say we are now going to enjoy some tea and coffee in bone china cups with cream cakes, but alas, we're not. We haven't got it. But yeah, so thanks all for your attendance.
Step up into the void.
Say it again, Ant. What do you say?
Step up into the void and get cooking, you know.
Right, on that note, then I'm going to declare the meeting closed. Thanks very much.